Hey there again, Pastor Justin here. Let's jump right into how to craft our stories when it comes to gospel conversations. So it's one thing to talk about what is a gospel conversation, but how do I craft my story in light and what is a gospel conversation? And so let me give you 4 tenets for a gospel conversation. First of all, the first thing a part of your story, number 1, this is my life before Jesus. This is my life before Jesus. What was your life like? What were you dealing with? What were you living into before you met Jesus? Secondly, this is when I realized I needed Jesus, right? This is when I realized I needed Jesus. Thirdly, how did I respond when I realized I needed Jesus? And lastly, how Jesus has changed my life. So let me go back through those a little bit and unpack it a little bit. So the first step, the first part of your story of a gospel conversation is this is my life before Jesus. Now, all of us don't have the major monumental, we can jump to sex, drugs, and alcohol story. But if that's your story, it's relevant. But if that's not your story, that doesn't mean you're not relevant, right? You may have a story of relationship, of anxiety, of trauma, whatever that is. This is my life before Jesus. So before I met Jesus, so maybe you were a child, if you were saved early, like 12, 13 years old, maybe you were in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, 70s, whatever your life was before Jesus. This is where I was. This is who I was. And a lot of times we don't communicate the ugliness, the rawness of our stories. That's where the rawness comes in. But if there's some place in that rawness you haven't healed from, then first of all, before you talk about it at all, wrestle with the Lord about that raw part of your story. Then once you feel that you can talk about it, this is my life before I met Jesus. Then after we talk about what we were before we met Jesus, secondly, what was the moment like when you realized you needed Jesus? And for some of you, it might be this huge aha moment. The cloud was shining, a dream, whatever it was. For me personally, it was a dream, right? It was this moment I recognized I needed Jesus. For somebody else, it might just be a song you heard on the radio. It might be a song you heard at a church. It might be a sermon that you heard. It might be someone who engaged with you. It might be someone who passed away. And it was them passing that made you recognize the power of religion, whatever that was. So before you met Jesus, what did you realize? How was it when you realized I need Jesus? Then thirdly, how did you respond to that? How did you respond? Did you respond by going to church? Did you respond by diving into your word? Did you respond by engaging with friends? Did you respond by asking questions? Did you respond by calling someone? How did you respond, and why did you respond that way? For me, when I recognized I needed Jesus, I immediately scheduled a meeting to talk to my pastor, and I sat down and talked to my pastor about what that meant. And it wasn't my parents, it was the pastor of my parents at the time. How did I respond? I was trying to discern, man, what does this stuff mean? And then lastly, after that moment, since your life has been after Jesus, how has Jesus changed your life? How has your life changed since Jesus has come into your life? And then to talk about that. Too often we spend too much time talking about our sin and we don't talk about the life change with Jesus. And I want you to spend time talking about the life change with Jesus. It doesn't take away, man, I've had issues, I've had situations, I've had insecurities, I've had things I've worked through. But how has your life changed since Jesus has come into your life? And I want you to think about that. I want you to pray through that, man. This is what has happened since Jesus came into my life. And this is how he's changed it. This is how he's enriched it. We talk about this in the sermon when we cast vision, that don't spend all of your time talking about your sin if you're not going to talk about what Jesus did in spite of all that sin. We can talk about everything that went wrong in our lives, but don't talk about what's wrong if you're not going to talk about what's gone right. So the 4 tenets of your story in a gospel conversation: what was your life like before Jesus? How did you realize you needed Jesus? How did you respond to Jesus? And how has Jesus changed your life? Do me a favor, if you have questions, feel free to email me at pastor@csbchurch.org. I'm here to help you walk through this, discern this as well. But that's your story. Now, here's a challenge I give you with your story. Journal that story, write that story down, and share it with somebody else. It will help you as you seek to work through, man, what does story really mean to me? Hey, listen, I'm excited for you as you discern exactly what God is challenging you to do. God bless you.